Welcome back to T-News, your pit stop for everything shaking up the auto world. And right now, the engine of global trade is roaring louder than ever. It's February 23, 2025, and the battlefield of international commerce is on fire. The U.S. has slapped tariffs on Europe, Canada, and beyond. France is striking back with bold countermeasures, and the European Union is rallying its forces. But while the West is locked in a slugfest, one player is quietly stealing the spotlight: China. The Asian giant isn't sitting on the sidelines. It's using the chaos to rewrite the rules of global trade. Today, we're breaking down how China is turning tariffs into triumphs and giving automakers and the world something to think about. Buckle up, because this ride covers 7 big factors. Let's dive into the first 3. Global trade is a chessboard, and right now every move counts. President Trump's latest salvo, a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum with auto tariffs looming in April, has sent shockwaves through the US and Europe. France and the EU are scrambling to respond. But here's the twist. While the West bickers, China is playing the long game. China's masterstroke turning chaos into strategy. Picture this: early 2025. Trump doubles down on his America First playbook. A 25% tariff on steel and aluminum goes live in March, with auto tariffs set for April. The goal? Protect American manufacturers. The reality? It's pushing allies like France and the EU into a corner. And who's waiting with open arms? China. Trump didn't stop there. By February 10th, he slapped a 10% tariff on all Chinese goods, from electronics to auto parts. Beijing hit back fast. 15% tariffs on US coal and natural gas, 10% on crude oil and big vehicles. A tit for tat, yes, but China isn't just defending itself, it's going on the offensive. Take France. In 2023, French trade with China hit nearly $79 billion, an 800% surge over 6 decades. Macron's Beijing visit that year wasn't just photo ops. It sealed 18 major deals in aviation, agriculture, and automotive tech. Now, with US tariffs driving up steel and aluminum costs, those deals look like lifelines. For Europe's automakers, China isn't just a supplier. It's becoming the partner that keeps production alive. And Beijing's reach goes beyond Europe. From Brazil to Africa, China is weaving trade networks that bypass US influence. This isn't chaos, it's cold strategy. By February 2025, China's Commerce Ministry is openly pushing tariff talks with the EU, aiming to cut into Europe's 45% tariffs on Chinese EVs. At the same time, it's locking in deals with countries less tangled in Western disputes. While Washington and Brussels slug it out, Beijing is building a trade empire. The EV edge, battery power, rules the game. If cars are at the heart of this trade war, electric vehicles are the pulse. And China has the strongest beat, thanks to one word: batteries. Every major automaker, from Ford to Volkswagen, knows EVs are the future. But you can't build them without batteries. China controls more than 70% of global lithium-ion production. That's the real power play. Look at the numbers. In 2024, Chinese EV giant BYD sold over 3 million vehicles worldwide, surpassing Tesla in volume. Many of those cars landed in Europe. Affordable, tech-packed, and shielded from tariff-driven cost spikes. What is rewriting the playbook? Meanwhile, European automakers face a dilemma. US tariffs on steel and aluminum are jacking up production costs. BMW, Renault, and others are feeling the pinch. China, meanwhile, is offering Europe cheap, reliable batteries and even joint ventures. Remember Macron's 2023 deals? Automotive tech was front and center, and now those agreements are paying off. China isn't just selling cars. It's embedding itself in the future of Europe's auto industry. Stellantis is exploring partnerships to tap into China's EV ecosystem. Here's the twist. Despite the EU's 45.3% tariffs on Chinese EVs meant to punish subsidies, China is still winning. By scale and innovation, they control the raw materials, lithium, cobalt, graphite, and have the manufacturing power to keep costs low. A Reuters report from February 20th says China is negotiating hard to lower EU tariffs, but exports are booming anyway. Even Volkswagen is sourcing Chinese batteries to stay competitive. This isn't just about cars. It's about who controls the technology shaping the next decade. Contrast that with the US. Tesla has a new gigafactory in Shanghai, but back home American automakers are scrambling. Tariffs on Canadian and Mexican parts, vital for Detroit's supply chains, are set to raise costs even higher come March. China's edge? They don't need to import much. Their EV pipeline is entirely in-house. For Europe, the choice seems clear. Lean on China, cut losses, and keep EVs flowing. China isn't catching up. They're leading the race. Who wins the trade war? Trump's tariff crusade claims to protect jobs and manufacturing, but it could be giving China the upper hand. On February 13th, Trump ordered reciprocal tariffs, matching what other countries charge on U.S. goods. Sounds tough, but here's the catch. The U.S. imported $240 billion in auto parts from Canada and Mexico in 2023 alone. A 25% tariff could add $830 to the average household's tax bill, according to the Tax Foundation. Ford CEO Jim Farley even warned it could blow a hole in the industry. The ripple effects are global. Europe, already hit with U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum, now faces auto tariffs that could devastate German exports, over 800,000 cars a year to the U.S. In response, the EU is turning closer to China. Commission President Ursula von der Leyen promised countermeasures on February 11th, but also cautioned against getting too cozy with Beijing. Still, China is laughing all the way to the bank. Their exports to Europe are rising fast. Trump's 10% tariffs are nothing compared to the 61% average they'd face if Washington revoked special trade status, a move still under discussion. Meanwhile, European automakers are already adapting. Stellantis is exploring joint ventures in China. VW is buying batteries from CATL. Mercedes is signaling stronger ties with Asia. The EU's dilemma is clear. Push back hard against China and risk losing a lifeline, or lean in and anger Washington. Either way, China is emerging as the power broker in the EV revolution. This crossroads isn't just about trade, it's about survival. Impact on the auto industry. The trade war is slamming the auto world like a rogue piston, and China's role is the spark plug, keeping it alive. Trump's tariffs are hitting, hard 25% on steel, and aluminum is already driving raw material costs higher. The threat of 25% auto tariffs has executives sweating from Detroit to Stuttgart. Goldman Sachs estimates metal tariffs alone could add $1,200 to the cost of a mid-size sedan. Add auto tariffs and that price jump hits $6,000 per vehicle, a profit killer. European automakers feel it the most. Germany's BMW exports 300,000 cars from its Spartanburg, South Carolina plant each year. Ironically, they're made in America but still hit by tariffs on imported parts. CEO Oliver Zipse warned in February they may rethink everything if costs keep climbing. France's Renault and Italy's Stellantis face the same squeeze. But China flips the script. While the U.S. raises costs, China is dangling innovation. With 70% of global EV battery supply, they hold the cheat code for the industry's future. Take BYD. On February 17th, they announced a new factory in Hungary, sidestepping EU tariffs by building inside Europe. Their EVs, like the Dolphin at a $30,000 base price, are winning buyers fast. Meanwhile, Volkswagen leans on China's CATL for cheaper batteries in models like the ID.4. And China isn't just selling parts, they're sharing tech. Joint R&D deals cover next-gen batteries and autonomous driving. On February 14th, Stellantis signed a deal with China's GAC to co-develop hybrid tech, targeting 2026 rollouts. Higher costs from tariffs are being offset by cheaper, smarter Chinese technology. Still, risks loom. Supply chain chaos from looming Canadian and Mexican tariffs could snarl U.S. production. Ford's Jim Farley summed it up on February 21st. We're either innovating with partners or bleeding cash. The Global South joins the game while the U.S. and EU fight. China is redrawing the trade map with the Global South: Brazil, India, Africa, Southeast Asia. Trump's February 10th tariff slapped 10% on all Chinese goods, plus new threats, 25% on Canadian and Mexican parts, starting March 1st, 15% on Indian steel exports. These countries aren't folding, they're pivoting. Brazil, an $8 billion steel exporter to the U.S., now at risk. On February 16th, China signed a $5 billion deal, trading steel for EV and solar tech. BYD plants in Brazil aim for 150,000 cars by 2027. India. Facing U.S. tariffs, it secured $3 billion in EV battery investments from China on February 19th. Africa. Through Belt and Road, China is pumping $2 billion into ports and roads this year, while training workers for future EV assembly plants. The global south, over 4 billion people, growing markets and raw materials, is becoming a new battlefield. Europe's trade chief Valdis Dombrovskis hinted on February 22nd at closer ties with India and Brazil, but China is already ahead. They're not just trading, they're integrating. Final verdict: a new auto order trumps tariffs were meant to protect U.S. jobs and industry. Instead, they've sparked a global reshuffle. 25% on steel and aluminum since March 4th, 10% blanket tariff on Chinese goods since February 10th. 5% auto tariff looming on April 2nd. The goal: make America the king of the road again. The reality: rising costs, strained supply chains, and foreign rivals gaining ground. Ford's Jim Farley warned, these tariffs could blow a hole in our industry. The Tax Foundation says households already face an $830 yearly hit. Canada and Mexico, key suppliers, are next in line. Meanwhile, Europe is preparing counterstrikes and China is weaving through the wreckage, turning tariffs into opportunity. This isn't just a trade war, it's the birth of a new world order in the auto industry. Scared their 800,000 car exports to the US could collapse, Europe is watching chaos unfold. Meanwhile, China isn't just surviving, it's rewriting the playbook. Trade with France jumped to $78.9 billion in 2023. And early 2025 numbers show it's still climbing. Those Macron G deals from 2023 are paying off. Joint ventures in battery tech and a market unfazed by U.S. threats. For the auto industry, this is seismic. EVs are the future, and with China controlling 70% of global battery supply, they hold the ace. BYD's new Hungary plant, announced February 17th, bypasses EU tariffs and rolls out $30,000 EVs, while European brands scramble to catch up. And it's not just Europe. China's pushing into the global south. On February 16th, a $5 billion Brazil Steel for EVs deal locked in supply for BYD plants through 2027. 3 days later, India struck a $3 billion battery pact, a direct snub to Trump's 15% steel tariff. Africa's also in play with a $20 billion Belt and Road boost. Beijing's laying tracks for a trade empire that skips the West entirely. So is this a new order? Let's check the scoreboard. The U.S. is losing leverage. Tariffs meant to protect jobs could backfire. Goldman Sachs warns of a 2% GDP dip if the fight escalates. Europe's caught in the middle. Von der Leyen's tough talk on February 11th sounds strong. But the EU is still buying Chinese batteries and eyeing Asian markets. China's the wild card. They're not just winning trade, they're winning influence. Auto executives are paying attention. On February 20th, Mercedes CEO Ola Källenius hinted at shifting investments to stable markets, code for China. VW is already there. Stellantis is racing to join forces with GAC. This isn't just about cars. It's about who controls the next decade. If the US and EU can't slow the feud, China might not just lead the auto race, they could redraw the global map. There is a slim chance of a pivot. Talks between Scholz and Catherine Tai on February 18th, plus the EU's pledge on February 22nd to deepen ties with India and Brazil, suggest options are still open. But China isn't waiting. They're accelerating, and the finish line is theirs to lose. Here's the reality. Tariffs that were supposed to protect the West are pushing allies into Beijing's orbit. Europe leans on Chinese tech while dodging US punches. The auto industry is the canary in the coal mine. Rising costs, shifting supply chains, and a frantic race to electrify. If Trump's April auto tariff hits, chaos follows. Cars could cost $6,000 more in the US, tanking demand, while Europe's exports risk collapse. A US-EU deal by mid-March might slow things down, but don't count on it. Beijing isn't worried. On February 21st, Global Times bragged about unshakable resilience. For car lovers, it's thrilling and terrifying. Cheaper Chinese EVs could flood the streets, but legacy brands might stall. In the short term, tariffs mean higher prices. $2,700 more per car just from metals, according to J.P. Morgan. Long term, Chinese innovation could drive prices lower. Detroit is nervous. Germany's on edge, but Shenzhen is hiring. The big question: can the West unite, or are we watching China kick off a new era? My take: China isn't just in the driver's seat, they're rebuilding the entire track. What's your call? Is China unstoppable, or can the US and EU mount a comeback? Drop your thoughts in the comments. This story is far from over. Don't miss the next lap. Piston Pundits has you covered for all things auto and beyond.